Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name's Jack Parrock. For those people that are watching live, welcome. We're going to have a discussion today about Qatargate, and I've got some journalists joining me who are real sort of experts in this story at the moment. And I'm new to live streaming. I'm a Brussels journalist, and I'm working on TV all the time, but there's not much space, I find, for extensive video discussions around Qatargate, and there's a lot of details around it that are meaning that perhaps we're not talking so much about it. So I just thought I'd start a live stream. I got inspired by someone yesterday. So welcome to the first show. I firstly just wanted to say that one of the interesting things with this is that the reality of the Qatargate scandal that broke at the end of 2022 is that it's super pan-European. So it involves Eva Kaili, the former vice president of the European Parliament, who's Greek. So the Greek press are all over it from that side. There's a huge amount of Brussels press going on it. So CNAC, Le Soir and La Repubblica, they have a sort of thing going on. They're doing loads of great scoops. Politico's all over it here. And there's tons of press going on in Italy, where Antonio Panzeri, the former MEP that's right at the heart of this, and his assistant Francesco Giorgi have massive links. And there's been a ton of new information that have come out today that has happened in Italy. And that's why I'm delighted to have with us Camilla Conti and Eddie Wax, who are going to talk through this with me. Yeah, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us on a Tuesday, for joining me on a Tuesday evening. I really, really appreciate you. Thursday evening, there you go.
Thursday evening.
Who
Even
knows
in
these
Italy.
weeks? Yeah, exactly. So I think we'll keep this conversation relatively esoteric. I'm not going to sort of break it down from the beginning, but I want to start from what has happened in Italy over the last few days, because there's been a real shift to Milan. And Camilla, can you tell us, firstly introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about what has happened and what's going on with your reporting from Italy?
Okay, first of all, good evening to everybody who is listening, and good evening to Eddie, and good evening, Jack. First of all, I wanted to say two things. I'm sorry for my English. It will be not proper or perfect. I'll try to do my best.
You're
and
wonderful.
The second one, that in this story, I'm not alone. We are following this story since a lot of months. I've been involved in this story in the last 6 days. We are working as a team. We are a team of about 4, sometimes 5 people following this story during months. And I'm a financial journalist, so I was involved just to follow the companies who were involved in this story. But the main journalist at the top of this team is Giacomo Amadori, and he's not with us today this evening because he was very busy. And he brought the most big scoops of this story in Italy.
Tell us what happened.
Yeah. One of the scoop is the scoop about Equality, which is a company, an Italian company. The name is Equality SRL. It's a kind of company in Italy. And it's the company that Panzeri and Mr. Giorgi, who was helping Panzeri in the European Parliament, was making affairs through before the other NGO that was related to Mr. Panzeri. It's very difficult to understand the story if you don't know what's back. So I'll try to do my best. We started from this new. I read just the title of our article. The title was "Giorgi gave a fake NGO to the Slovenian bartender companion of Panzeri." So
I'm going to stop you just for our viewers. This is one of the big issues with Qatargate, is the networks and the reporting is getting so diverse. Initially, it was just like a few MEPs, and now there's people in Italy, a Slovenian bartender, there's a Turkish lawyer and stuff. So tell us about what Georgie, we're going to get into all of them, but tell us about what Georgie did.
Yes, you were right. It's pan-European, also not only for the journalists that are following the story, but also for the people who is connected to this story. And now there's the Turkish map that we are following. That's really, really interesting. So the story about equality is connecting a lot of people. Pier Antonio Panzeri, which was the member of the European Parliament, and then his old assistant, Francesco Giorgi, who spoke a lot. And he is like not a pentito. I was reading, Eddie, before starting the connection, an article of Jacopo Barigazzi that I know because I worked with him a lot of times ago in a financial newspaper in Italy. And he wrote an article for Politico about the Italian pentiti, the Italian way of managing the inquiries and the judiciary's cases. So
let's stop there and break it, because this pentiti is the agreement that Panzeri has made with Belgian authorities to cooperate with them and tell them how the corruption ring works.
Exactly, to have less penalties. So they are starting to speak, and even in Italy, everybody, also some politician, is very worried because they are starting to speak. Coming back to the beginning, Mr. Giorgi told a lot of things and told that there was a mysterious man, Palestinian man, that suggested to him and to Panzeri and to this equality to connect with another man just to have some money, to put inside the equality. And that's why we came through the equality, looking forward the companies, the connections, all the, not only open sources data, but also looking at in the company's data in Italy, but not only in Italy, because there was another equality in Estonia. How do you say in English?
In Estonia, in Tallinn. Yeah.
Estonia, in Tallinn. So it was through these companies that we were on the road to Mr. Camus, which is this mysterious, well, not so mysterious at the moment, because we wrote a lot about him, which is a Turkish, is not a lawyer. I read a lot of articles in these days that define him a lawyer. No, he's not a lawyer. He didn't study as a lawyer. He made different studies in London. He studied from Ankara and then came to London. But he's not a lawyer. He's talking about himself as one time as a consultant, one time as a legal advisor, but he's not a lawyer. And this man was a connection between the equality and some other subjects who could find some money for this company. And that's the big problem, because this man, Hakan Camus, which has a long story, and if you want to, after we can talk about more. Yeah. It's really near the Erdogan family. So the question that we made at the end, at the first article, and then I finished the first round, is what's his bringing this story to? Is bringing us even to Erdogan's affair, or something worse, the laundering of money, the cleaners of this story? What are involved in? So I give you the words because I talked a lot.
That was a great introduction, because what's really interesting is when it first broke, it was like bags of cash and that
a lot of money
that were found in Brussels, and now it appears that there's like shell companies that exist in different places in different ways, and there are different figures as well. And I mean, we'll get on to Hakan Camus in a minute, but I wanted to bring you in, Eddie, because you've also seen a Brussels connection to this equality company. Can you explain your understanding of it and how it links to the sort of rest of the Qatargate scandal and the money coming through the European Parliament?
Yeah, well, I'm grateful to Camilla and La Verità for busting open this whole new sort of thread and connection and chain of money laundering companies. I'm very frustrated because we were very close. We were very close to being able to publish the name of this Turkish-British gentleman, but we didn't get there fast enough. And I think that's testament to the sort of strong competition that we're all, that all of us are going through as journalists. And it's fascinating from a European perspective, from a media perspective as well, to see how we're all, competing and everything like that. But, what I managed to find out was, yes, that equality, there was an attempt to establish a sort of Brussels, a presence for equality in Brussels. I don't think they registered it as a Belgian company, as far as I know so far. But Monica Bellini, from the evidence that I've kind of gathered, was flying to Brussels, was quite regularly in Brussels, and obviously with her connection to Panzeri and Giorgi, that made sense, and she was trying to kind of get a base for equality, set up here. I mean, the strange thing for me is that this money laundering network, the sums. I mean, I haven't read every single latest piece by you, Camilla, yet, and that's on my list to do. But it seems like the sums of money that may have passed through these companies are smaller than the sort of bags of cash that were found in December. So that's a curious thing to me. But basically, Brussels, Milan, Tallinn, London, the geographical spread of this story is growing. Istanbul maybe now, or Ankara, who knows? Who knows where it could spread next? Obviously Doha, obviously Rabat, are already on the map. So it's a spreading story, it's a spreading web. And I think the interesting thing for readers or people following this loosely, because I don't think anyone in their right mind is following it as closely as us three, or us three and my other colleagues at Politico and your colleagues. But I think it's interesting for readers to think about, what are we actually going to discover here? And that's the fascinating thing. That's the exciting thing. Is that it's all developing. Every week you find a new capital city or something where there's something going on. Anyway, I'm rambling now. But
No. This is honestly what you've laid out there is exactly why I wanted to do this live stream, because there's so much going on. It's also, I find, quite difficult to write things that feel very connected for readers to understand or to take to air on TV, because it all feels like, right, okay, so there's this new person, Monica Bellini, right, and who the hell are they? And a lot of people that are reading don't even really know who the MEPs and who those figures are oftentimes. Us in the Brussels bubble or Italian journalists do know these people, but it's not too connected. But it's really significant how the corruption has existed. So as you can see, I've shared a screen. I'm trying. This is it's such an unprofessional screen. It's the first time I'm doing it. But this lady with the glasses on, this is Monica Bellini. So let's sort of dissect her involvement for a little bit. Her name is now it's been around a little bit for a couple of weeks. I think we can all agree she's sort of been seen coming up. But Camilla, can you explain your understanding of Monica Bellini's link to the Panzeri, Giorgi, whatever, Qatargate corruption ring?
Before answering, can I say something? Because you are inspiring me thoughts while you're talking. It's very difficult to talk about this story, because, for example, in Italy today, everybody was talking about your article, Jack, because it was very sensitive, the fact that Panzeri, if you want to remind just a little bit of your article about transcripts that you wrote for Deutsche Welle, it was very sensitive for us as a media narration, the fact that Panzeri told, I had so much money, so much cash that I throw in the garbage. And everybody today is talking about this.
I didn't know that. I didn't know people are following that article.
I could find a lot of companies, the Turkish road, but the most important thing today in Italy was this sentence of Panzeri. Because in Italy, we are very political when we talk about stories like the Qatargate. We have a government on the other side of the PD, the Democratic Party, which is connected to Panzeri and all to the environment of Panzeri in Brussels. So it's a game to speak to some points and not to the others. And because also it's very difficult to explain, to go inside this story. So it's really difficult. And another thing that I want to tell to Eddie, Eddie is right. It's a very good thing that there's a lot of competition between journalists all in Europe. And it's very nice, not only because it's a competition that is very smart and pushes you to make better and better, because you know that lots of other people are on the same story, but we can transform this competition also in a value. I mean, sharing information. That's why this morning I called Jack, that I didn't know until this morning. And then today I also met Eddie, and it makes me feeling like in a big European team, and it's much better for me as a journalist, because I know that, I'm sure that we are working for the truth, not for writing only a piece of the story for political reasons or stuff like that. So
I really agree.
That's what I wanted to say.
There's a lot of respect at the journalists,
exactly,
I think, because it's so dense and difficult, and so.
And we have one problem more, that we write in Italian, and anybody knows Italian outside Italy. So for you, it's easier because Jack, Eddie, you write in English. The Italian newspaper, Jack, you didn't know anything about our articles until I translated it to this morning and I sent it to you.
100%.
And it's very hard for us to show that we are working.
You inspired me to do this. Let's get talking about it. So let's go to. I'm
sorry because I talked a lot. And so Monica Bellini, according to investigators, it's the how do you say in Italian is commercialista, the girl of the money, of the accounts, the counter, and she was arrested at the end, if I'm not wrong, right? At the beginning, she also spoke with a lot of television before being arrested. So just telling, no, I don't know anything about this story, I'm outside. When we discovered the story about equality, and Guardia di Finanza, the financial investigators in Italy, started to follow the story of equality, they understood that the role of Monica Bellini was really much more complicated and was really much more linked to Panzeri's affairs. So I have here, I can't show because it's in Italian, but it's the informativa of some papers of the investigators in Italy. And it's really interesting because they made some scheme between people, between the Panzeri, Giorgi, and Bellini, but also between companies. And it was like a little world was moving about around these people, which was not only Monica Bellini, but also the little studios, little companies linked to her, through which she had to manage this money and to pay also the money when the money came in to put out. So everything is going around this woman that you can see in the picture of our newspaper, but also around other actors of the plot, like Silvia Panzeri, which is the daughter of Mr. Panzeri, and also around Mr. Giorgi, but also around the father of Mr. Giorgi, the brother of Mr. Giorgi, who were the shareholders of this equality, and also around the fiancé of Silvia Panzeri, which was the Slovenian bartender from which we started the call tonight. So it's a really small world, but this small world spreads outside in lots of little, how can I say, streets in different ways. And so it's really, really interesting to discover. And Eddie was right. It's not enough money we are talking about. I mean, if I take this
let me stop you, Camilla. I'm going to ask Eddie. I'm going to ask Eddie to run through the money a little bit. What you know about the money of equality. I know that in the article you wrote today, there's sort of a rundown, and it's not the sort of millions of bags of cash that we saw before, right?
No, it's not. It's around, it's about a couple of 100,000, I think. But this article that came out today, it's it's not to do down my employer or us, but we are a couple of steps behind, I think, at La Verità, but we're trying to put forward our own historical kind of path bit by bit. So we're maybe moving at a slightly slower pace, but essentially, and this won't be news to Camilla at all, but in 2019 they registered an annual revenue of 240k, profits of just over 100,000. So if this is all money that's laundered, and I don't have proof of that yet, and maybe we'll never get it, but it doesn't see then even if that's true, that's not a huge amount of money, considering that basically 1.5 million in cash was recovered in the first few days of the whole operation by the Belgian police. So equality. And the other element of this is not just the criminal side of things, but it's the sort of equality. It's putting itself forward, as this kind of human rights and ethical company. It's all about equality. But it's if it's a front, then that is also bad for that's terrible for the world of human rights, and it's an even more galling and even more kind of cynical to use this as a front, because who would if you call it evil piracy limited or something, then that's one thing. But if you're trying to trade in on the cachet of good human rights NGOs, of which there are many in Brussels doing solid work, and in Italy I'm sure, then that's just really just another sort of low blow.
This was exactly the point with Panzeri's fight impunity, which is ostensibly to try and tackle human rights abuses in some of the hardest hit places in the world, and instead was funneling money from other places, according to the investigations so far. So I suppose my question is, when I read what everyone's been writing today about this sort of moving to Italy, about the arrests, about equality, about Monica, my question is, this money in these sort of this consultancy company, how does that affect EU lawmaking? How does that company in Italy turn to funnel money towards different MEPs and stuff? Do we know anything about that yet, Camilla?
I didn't understand the real question. You want to know how this money from Italy can reach the European entities?
Yeah, exactly. So right now it's kind of flung out into Italy, right? Where the money, and there's clearly some money being funneled through, but the money has to be used for something. So have you got a link yet of how that sort of came into the pockets of members of the European Parliament, potentially?
I don't have proof at the moment. We don't have proof, but
that's what we're looking for.
If you understand what Hakan Camus, the Turkish one, told to Financial Times, to Silvia Sciorilli yesterday, he said, I gave money to this company because I asked them, or someone told me that these people could help me pushing some causes, like the Palestinian one. He did say he was following other cases with Kashmir and the Indian story in the past. So he tells to the Financial Times, I just gave money because I wanted a connection in the European Parliament that could help me. And he also said to Financial Times, I'm not so happy of this connection. They didn't do a good job about this. So he's complaining also about this. I don't know if what Camus is telling is the truth. We tried also to reach him before the financial article and after the financial article, but he never answered to us. I don't know why, obviously.
I tried to get Sylvia from the FT to join us tonight because it was such a good scoop. But she's not available. And as you can see on the screen, this is Hakan Camus.
Yeah, exactly.
And just for our viewers if anyone is watching, and just to say, if anyone's watching and they want to comment or write a question or say something about it, or even if you're watching this on record, I'll try and follow up. I think we're interested. I'm certainly interested in this being a sort of a platform for discussion. But essentially, in interview transcripts with Giorgi, and then later with the Panzeri transcripts as well, there was this Turkish lawyer and this Turkish businessman and his lawyer in London. That's how it was described, and the hunt then began. I wasn't anywhere near this. Camilla, you got it, and Eddie, you were saying. But what's your understanding, Eddie, of this connection? How much?
We follow the money. We simply follow the money, and we follow the companies, because starting from equality, and then from equality, the Guardia di Finanza started to investigate about equality, and then we arrived to this mysterious man. And then what we wrote about this man to write his story, to understand better who was this man, who did in the past, and what was the role of this man in the story. I went through a lot through open sources. I found a lot of stuff about this man. I found interesting reports. One in particular was written by Disinfo Lab, which is a kind of onlus who makes reports and investigations about, it's an independent society that makes this kind of investigations. Because they understood that there was something strange about this man when he was following this cause, this, how do you say in English, trial against Indian government for Kashmir people. And it was a strange guy with a strange companies behind him, because he was always opening a company and then closing and then changing the name and opening another one. So strange movements. If you go through this, the story of this man, it's really interesting. Not only because he's opening and closing companies, always because different companies, but also strange companies. For example, a company in London that was that had in the shareholders also the one Turkish minister, Sismuk, if I don't make mistake about his name. And it was really interesting, because when you go through the story of Hakan Kamuz, you always keep in touch with Erdogan families, the Turkish government. Even if you hear some video of Kamuz, there's a lot of videos all around. When he speaks, it seems that he's speaking for the government, defending the government, saying that Erdogan is a good boy and is making good things. So that was strange. And
let me stop you, Camilla, because this is it. So we've got Hakan Kamuz doing all this stuff. He's becoming a player, but Eddie, he's not charged with anything.
No.
Not as far as we know. No, not as far as we know. But
exactly, not at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where he is. I don't know.
Exactly.
I didn't attempt to contact him. So I feel a little bit less sort of legitimate. I feel like I have less legitimacy in talking about him, because I haven't even given him an opportunity to answer any questions from me. So, we don't know where he is right now. I certainly don't.
I told to Jack this morning, because I'm not worried. I mean, everybody's thinking about his business, but he disappeared. And I don't know if there's, if something is written on an Italian newspaper, it's a business. But if you read something on the Financial Times, it's much different. So probably someone in Istanbul yesterday, I think it was not a good day for him yesterday.
I'm gonna flip this, because there's so much. I think you've shown, Camilla, firstly how interesting, but also how disparate what's going on in Italy at the moment is, and there's a lot of dust to settle on what's going on there. Eddie, I want to flip to you a bit about the Brussels investigation, because essentially this started in Brussels. We have 4 people: Kylie, Panzeri, Giorgi, Figo Talamanca, who's now been released unconditionally. It seems he just shared an office with Panzeri and kind of got linked in. But the judge, Michel Claes, is now sort of up for recusal, and there's been this whole case. I wonder if you can take us through that, because the Belgian justice system appears to be struggling to deal with this, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's a curveball thrown by Mark Tarabella and his team of lawyers, who is an MEP, sorry, who was arrested and charged with corruption, based on primarily solely almost based on the allegation that Panzeri bunged him 140,000 euros worth of bribes. So that's the allegation against him made by Panzeri. So what Tarabella has then done, pretty much as soon as he went into prison, on these preliminary charges, has said that the judge, the investigating judge, who really is the kind of main figure here on the Belgian side of things, is biased, is biased against him, and that's his team says that's based on a particular line in one of the legal documents, which says where he's reading it, the lawyer, the Tarabella's team is reading that and saying this proves, saying that these are suspicious activities. I think the word is suspicious. That proves that you're kind of harboring a bias, and you're kind of already inclined to believe that my client, Mr. Tarabella, is guilty. So then that's really put a lot of sand in the gears and slowed things down, because Claes has to fight back against that. He has to prove that he's not biased. But my personal kind of feeling about this is that it is a bit of an attempt to kind of drag things out, or just kind of put a bit of a spanner in the works. And I don't see how a judge who's built a case over many months and basically is the kind of figurehead of it can really be sort of swept aside by this kind of strategy. But I don't know.
It got pretty vicious in the court the other day, though, right? There was some pretty stringent arguments.
Yeah, of course, and because we're talking here about people's freedom, and we're talking about a well-respected MEP, I think, well liked, very kind of an MEP who was seen as a cheery figure. He even kind of went around the parliament last year with Saint Nicolas, like handing out presents. So he was someone who had a lot of friends in the parliament. People thought well of him, and suddenly he's deprived of his freedom and stripped of his legal immunity, and his reputation is really facing a huge barrage of attack. So of course, he's gonna give it all he's got and try everything he can to kind of disrupt disrupt this full frontal assault against him. But of course, we haven't really even mentioned, the other MEPs who are, the other MEP who's in prison, which is Eva Kaili, and she's been there longer than as long as Panzeri.
And as long Georgie's out.
Georgie's out
on a tag.
Exactly.
Which seems quite inexplicable with the other two remaining in prison, no?
Yeah, but I suppose I can only speculate, but I sort of think from people I'm talking to and my colleagues as well, who are much more following I'm following more the sort of European politics ramifications of it now, as well as trying to keep on top of the case. But basically, it seems like Georgie has talked. We've all read a lot of his testimony in sort of leaked documents and things. He seems like he's spoken up a lot. Whereas I would imagine that Kaili, we know Kaili is still protesting her innocence through her lawyers. So I think that the tactics of Michel Claes are pretty obvious here. It's if you keep saying you're innocent, and if you don't reveal, you don't play the game and basically cave in. And tell everything and admit that you're guilty, which maybe she isn't, but that remains to be seen. Then you basically get stuck. You stay in pretrial detention, and that has ramifications for her child and for her, obviously. So that seems to be the tactics. It was interesting for me when I saw that when Panzeri was arrested early on, and then after he made that kind of plea deal, that was when the charges, I think, were dropped against Sylvia and his wife. So it looked like there was an obvious sort of agreement there that the part of the deal would be that Panzeri's relatives would be kind of left alone. So those are the sort of negotiating tactics of Michel Claes. I think it's pretty obvious to see.
Exactly. I think that's a really useful piece of context. Also context that Eva Kaili and Francesco Giorgi share a child. The child that is there to be looked after is of both of them, and that just makes a sort of real family issue. And it's that side of things is really difficult as well. And it's not. Nobody's like, Nobody's likes reporting on that kind of stuff and seeing that kind of thing happen.
I agree.
So we've talked there a little bit about the Belgian case. It's ongoing. As we say, we just basically get information that either the person is going to be released or not. Either they've claimed for release or not. And then the other case is whether Michel Claes should remain the judge in the case. And at the moment, like, he's there. So a lot of these legal and investigative things have been Brussels based right now. But Camilla, I wonder if you can give us a rundown of where do you think, I mean, as you said, Monica Bellini's now been arrested. What's happening in Italy as far as like a legal investigation against this? And do you know about the cooperation with the Belgians?
No, I would like to know. I don't really know at the moment because it is too soon, and for the second reason is that I'm following the other side, the financial side. My colleague Giacomo is following the most important part, so the part that is related to your question. So I can't answer to you now at the moment.
Well,
I think.
Yeah, sorry. No, just I can contribute something on behalf of Gregorio Soggi, who is our top, one of my top Italian colleagues, and he was in the court today for the very brief kind of hearing of Monica Bellini, and that's the sort of anticlimax was that's been pushed back by 2 months, so that's it was postponed, and I think
very
there's
long.
for until the 9th of May, Europe Day, that's a fitting moment for a sort of pan-European investigation, pan-European story. But I think that there's an interesting theme here, or there's an interesting new development, which is the kind of the differences between the Italian investigation which is specifically into equality, but minus Monica Bellini, because she's subject to the Belgian investigation, which is going on, which is a much broader investigation into more people. And there seems to be, because of the reason, according to my colleague Gregorio, who's written a good piece for us that's up now, little plug for Politico, the reason why the appeal has been pushed back by 2 whole months, which really does delay things here, is because the documents still haven't arrived from the Belgian judicial system. So there's meant to be some kind of cooperation here, obviously, between European judicial systems, European prosecutors, but for some reason those documents are not actually landing on the desks of those investigators.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. It's not European united from this point of view, also for a lot of other point of view, but it's really, yes, you touched a good point. And
it's almost like Monica Bellini is kind of caught up in the middle of this kind of tug of war, where the reason she's having this hearing today, or was having it, was so that she could be extradited, or that because the Belgians are asking for her to be extradited to Belgium, right? But I mean, does she, if she may have connections to Belgium, but she's an Italian citizen by all accounts, and why shouldn't the Italians, put her on trial in Italy? So I suppose that's a fair question, and it's really interesting, the kind of the sort of pan-European politics of all of this. You've got an Italian MEP, a Greek MEP, an Italian assistant to two Italian MEPs, but they're all living in Brussels. So is it an EU? Is it an EU scandal? Is it an Italian scandal? Is it a Greek scandal? Is it a Belgian scandal? Because you also have a Belgian MEP who's detained at the moment. So it's all of it. But the fact is, there's no, there is an EU prosecutor, but they're not. They're looking at other things here. So it's it really is a patchwork of different judicial competences, and there's a bit of a tug of war where it looks like Monica Bellini is kind of being pulled in one arm by Italy and pulled by the other arm by Belgium.
That's going to be one of the things. Where does she?
It's the same level of journalism now. The patchwork is the problem. That you have to cherry picking and put together every element, and it's the same problem.
And I think even having this discussion, I hope you guys don't mind me saying this, like, it's really reflective of how my brain works when I'm reporting this. I'm like, oh yeah, but that thing, but that thing.
Exactly.
Does that matter? Is that important? Does that come in here? And like, so most stories, I don't know, when I'm writing, you have to like focus on one thing. So like Panzeri and what he did, Giorgi. I've seen what your article today, Camilla, was kind of about Camus and like what's going on there. And like, you just kind of have to do that. And even your articles are super long in a very nice way, as in super informative for Le Veritas. But like, even then you don't have enough lines and words to go through it, right? So one of the things I think that I wanted to, well, do you know what? We've got a question, so let's talk about this. No,
can I say just a short thing relating to this last part? For the first time in our newspaper today, and so tomorrow we will publish an article about this story with a lot of interesting, if you want to see you tomorrow, about the Palestinian guy, which perhaps is not Palestinian. Spoiler. And for the first time, we had 3 names to the top of the article. It was the first time for our newspaper. It's not normal for us to write 3 names, mine and the other colleague, because we have to work in a team for that reason that you told before, Jack, because it's a patchwork even inside our newspaper, our office. Sorry.
And just so what I wanted to bring in is we talk there like Belgium, Italy, Greek, everywhere. It's going crazy, and there's all being published in tons of different languages, which makes it difficult. But one of the things that we've almost barely touched on in this conversation already, which I think is significant, is where the money actually came from. So the Qatari authorities deny any involvement. The Moroccan authorities, Panzeri says he started in 2014 a relationship with them, and the money, like 50K each for him and Georgie for a bit. Then Mauritania through 2019, and it lasted a year. All of the governments deny any involvement if you can get them to comment on it. So I wonder whether you think perhaps a swerve towards the investigations of where that money was coming and what they were trying to do. My question is, are we too focused on just the networks in Europe, or is this where we should be focused, Eddie?
Well, obviously not. It takes two to tango. It takes 2 to be corrupt. You have to have you have to have people on the other side who are willing to take the risk. And I think in some ways, yes, the EU and the Parliament and certainly these MEPs and these people have taken a reputational, taken the reputational damage. But I think it hasn't been good for Qatar. It hasn't been good for Morocco either, with all these allegations. And I think if you're a Qatari diplomat or a Moroccan diplomat in Brussels, then life's very difficult for you at the moment. People are probably not willing to meet you. People are not setting up meetings for you. Other people would say that some of the access is there's still too much access. Lots of Moroccan lobbyists walking around the European Parliament all the time. Still. And I'm not saying that those ones have done anything wrong, but I think it's we should be thinking about whether because I think everything we've seen would suggest that these corrupt practices, these alleged corrupt practices, really were sanctioned at the highest levels of these governments. Because if the key person is the now Labour minister in Qatar, who's still very much in his job. And you've got very, high level people in the sort of intelligence service of Morocco and an ambassador, Moroccan ambassador, basically, doing these things or being the people, liaising with the MEPs, then that really does raise questions about how did, was this sanctioned? Was this just a little sort of ploy on the side for some of these people that they didn't really talk to anyone about? Were they kind of, were they going off on their own and just kind of doing stuff which they shouldn't have been, or were these full governments that were basically saying, right, I want you to do this, and it's going to be hard. No,
yeah, it's hard. They don't have the sort of democratic checks and balances a lot of these countries.
Well, also no, I can't see any evidence that Michel Claes, for example, the chief investigator, is demanding these people be extradited, to Belgium. I haven't seen any evidence of that yet. So it seems to be very much punishing the people who took the money rather than the people who gave out the money.
Yeah,
You're right.
It's I mean, this is it, isn't it? This is another sort of crux of this story when you're reporting it. I'm always like, at the beginning, and one of the things that hooked me onto it was like I found out some stuff from the Qatari side quite early on that was super interesting. They sort of accused the UAE of like tipping this scandal off and stuff.
Yeah,
and that's what got me onto this story in the first place. I was like on a Friday night seeing Simply Red in Antwerp and ended up like, big story in my hands. So one of the questions, though, let's take one of the questions that we've had in our chat. There aren't like tons of people watching, but I hope that the people that are interesting, and I hope that we're going to do this again. I'm going to try and do this with different people with the reporting. I think the Greeks as well probably need a voice in this. But one of the things is, do you think the scandal will spit? Because you're the Parliament reporter at Politico, right?
Yes.
Do you think it's going to spill out of the S&D group? So the Socialist group, all of the MEPs so far are in the Socialist group. And do you think it's going to have an effect on the elections next year? Luca, message that.
I'm not sure. I think it's too early to tell whether it will have an effect on the elections. It depends. I think media interest, maybe as evidenced by the fact that only like 10 people are watching us, has waned obviously since the first big headlines. But this is obviously going to take months and months and maybe years, who knows, before it comes to trial, before we get verdicts and everything. So if that pops up around May next year again, then it really could make a difference. So far, we're 3 months in, and it really has remained rather confined to a small pocket of S&D, Socialist and Democrat MEPs, Belgian, Greek, and Italian. However, other names have come up in other media reports, like Lara Comi, who's another Italian MEP, but as far as we know, she hasn't been there was the subject of any request to lift her immunity. So I don't think we have seen it spreading to other groups. What we have seen spreading is the political ramifications of Qatargate, which have been really big. It's caused a kind of internal convulsions in the parliament. All sorts of new topics are now very interesting to journalists and editors. Everything which is kind of Qatargate adjacent, from did you file your expenses for your trip when you had your plush hotel paid for in God knows anywhere around the world. There's a whole reform process going on inside the parliament. Touching everything from badges for former MEPs to I don't know, the kind of different committees and how they work on human rights, legislation and things like that. So I think Qatargate has been the theme of Parliament, certainly for me for the last 3 months. That doesn't mean it's all about the pure kind of criminal investigation. It's because it's put a spotlight on transparency, on integrity, on anti-corruption. There's now a whole committee that's kind of been transformed into a post-Qatargate kind of committee. So I think we have to wait and see. I think politically it's made a big impact in the S&D group. That was one of my stories in the last week. How lots of MEPs feel betrayed by their colleagues. They're a bit suspicious of some of their colleagues. They feel lied to. They feel upset. It's put a lot of pressure on the leadership to show a strong response, even though that same leadership was responsible for promoting Eva Kaili. And of course, it's also has taken a personal toll on a lot of these people, these advisors, these assistants, these MEPs, because this very small pocket of people were incredibly well connected. They were not just random people on the side in the dark. Some of them were discreet figures, but others, for example, like Francesco Giorgi, seemed to be very sociable figures with lots of friends and not going on holidays. And so everybody seems to be touched in a personal way almost by this scandal.
Eva Kaili was literally one of the sort of poster girls of the European Parliament, a young, good-looking, charming woman talking about digital stuff. I mean, it's everything that the Parliament's all about, right? It's progressive sort of, ideas. It's really interesting in that sense. This is actually something that I haven't actually been able to report on too extensively, but I've had loads of conversations with people in the European Parliament, not even in the groups. Not even in political groups or MEPs assistants and stuff like that, but people working in some of the units in the parliament who are everything is stagnated at the moment. Everyone's just super nervy about everything. And I personally, I do think it will have a big effect on the European Parliament elections, not because anyone in the member states is caring about it now, but when the EU elections come up, there will be a massive attack on the socialists by the other parties in that campaigning. There's no question about it that they're going to do that. Well, and there's no question that this investigation is probably I mean, the rate it's going at the moment is not going to get anywhere near trial before the elections in 2024. Camilla, I want to ask you, I know I'm finding this super interesting. This is exactly what I wanted this to be, by the way, a discussion about with people that I've had conversations with both of you over the last couple of days, and I was like, this is interesting. And I think there are people that aren't just us three that are obsessed with Qatargate, and I hope they'll be interested. Camilla, can you tell me what's happening in Italian politics?
I was looking at Twitter now at the moment, and just an example of how it works in Italy. Tonight there was a TV show, a talk show, and today, in these days, everybody in Italy is talking about the tragedy in the sea in Calabria. And so the matter is always the migrants in this moment. And today there was a press conference of Meloni and other ministers about migrants. So this is the main, the topic in Italy in these days. Tonight, I was looking before while you were talking, there is this Moretti, which is, I think she's in the European Parliament. Yes, she's in the European Parliament. And she was talking in a TV show about the policy of Meloni against the people in the sea. She was attacking Meloni, and everybody on the social network was telling her, what are you talking about? You have to be shut up because you have to worry about the Qatargate. You can't talk about this because you should talk about your problem, the problem of your party, what you did in Brussels. So that's how it works.
That's fascinating.
And there's a word, an Italian word, that is caciara, a lot of noise. I'm worried that this noise is not making the point about the most important thing. I mean, also, not only the elections in 2024, but also you were talking about, I'm not in Brussels, I'm not following the policy in Brussels, but I understood that the discussion was also all around the organization of the European Parliament, the underground, we call it sottobosco, what's inside the wood of the system. So I hope something is going to change, because it's very poor, it's very strange and deep when you are looking for the companies, but it's very poor for the people. I mean, even these people, Bellini, the other one, the daughter of Panzeri, they didn't speak English, so they needed a person who spoke English to manage the companies, the quality. So I know my English is not so good, but I mean, you are in Brussels. You're not just making the ragu in a house in Milan. It's much different. So I hope something is going to change, and there is not only caciara in the political way.
Yeah,
that's it.
This is the big question. This is it. I think we could go on for hours. Certainly me. But this has been so interesting. Is there anything else anyone wants to say before we sort of start wrapping it up? Otherwise, we'll end up going till midnight.
I'm just interested in this whole, and I know this whole kind of thread of Camus and the Palestinian, and I'm very excited to see who the Palestinian is.
Yeah, exactly. We're all waiting for your publishing tomorrow.
Yeah, but it's all kind of, I know it came from this kind of nugget inside one of these documents from many weeks ago. There's so many other little nuggets, and I just wonder what else might kind of open up at some point, whether it's in a week or in a month or in 2 months, and yeah, it's just so fascinating, the crazy complexity and the crazy lives and what these people have experienced. I mean, I want to speak to all of them. I want to be in the room with them, and I want to say, guys, what must it be like to be you? We mustn't lose that humanity. I'm not saying that they're innocent or anything. We don't know that. But these are people who made decisions after decisions after decisions for years. And I think we are now unpicking those decisions, bit by bit, and getting into the psychology a little bit. Obviously I'm not a psychologist, but trying to put myself in their shoes and think about why would they have done this? Why if you have if you had a young child, would you be taking these risks? Why, if you're an MEP, would you be taking these risks?
Vice president, good
That's for
money,
money.
tax-free, you're
So
fine.
it looks like it's a, you know, the pressures and the sort of decision making and the influence and all this kind of stuff and the vices and God knows, it's just fascinating.
And it's crazy to me, like I say, like there's like we've mentioned it already, but there's like a group of journalists. It's Italian, EU, Belgian, and Greek, and like a hardcore group are pretty obsessed with this story. And I think we all know, like it was a great story in the beginning. Great story. When I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is so juicy. God, give it to me. Like Brussels is so boring. But I think there's like so much more to this. And I think while the interest wanes, in the sort of way that we can fill lines and the way that we can definitely get it to TV for people like me, I do think that there is value in us keeping on going and communicating with each other and like waiting for each other's scoops. It's really nice to see like Camilla be like, right, I've got something tomorrow, and we'll all pick up on it, and that's really good. And you guys in Italy are doing really great. Camilla, is there anything?
Just a thing. Do you think the same question for you, Jack, and for you, Eddie? If all this stuff came out for Qatar business, do you think it's only for Qatar business, or is something is going up, like, for example, China, Iran, or something else? I mean, it's only a little part, a small part of a huge way of doing things, or because that's also is in my mind, this question.
In our newsroom, you know, where we have lots of journalists and lots of people working on this, but also working on their kind of their day jobs and coming in with their expertise. But we have lots of great colleagues. You've already mentioned Jacopo, and you know, I remember talking with Jacopo, and he was saying, you know, we were scratching our heads and saying, you know, why would these two countries need to be, you know, corrupting, you know, potentially, you know, people in the parliament? I mean, first of all, the parliament is widely seen as the least influential, weakest institution of the three. You know, the commission is the one which proposes the legislation. The council is, you know, the national governments. And secondly, you know, Qatar, you know, very gas, oil rich country, had helped out the EU massively when it came to Afghanistan and getting people evacuated, you know, when the Taliban took over. So they really, you know, the EU really owed Qatar for that. Morocco also, you know, has a long-standing, you know, strong relationship with the EU. It really can put pressure on the EU on things like migration. So does it really, you know, it has lots of levers, you know, it has strong financial, you know, like a trade agreement, controversial trade agreement with the EU. So why does it need to, you know, work through a small pocket of MEPs? And that goes back to your question, Camilla, like, you know, if these countries, you know, felt this necessary, imagine if you're a country which really has nothing, like a bit like Mauritania. You know, why should anyone pay attention to Mauritania? Why should anyone, you know, talk up Iran or China or Russia in Brussels? You know.
On that, so I've been thinking about this quite a lot as well. When I saw the Mauritania stuff, because they did it for a year, 50k to each of them. Panzeri says each of him through 2019, Panzeri and Georgie got 50,000 euros from them each, and then they stopped it. Presumably, if this is a government like that, is going to be like, what are they doing for us? Like, nobody in EU policy making is really, I mean, with all due respect to Mauritania, I'm sure it's a wonderful, lovely country. I've never been there, but like, it's not going to be a driver of foreign policy or like trade policy or anything in the European Union by nature of its size and economy. So this is it. Like, why when I first saw it, it's like, why would the countries do it? And then now, if I dare continue a little bit, and this was one of the things that was stirring in me as I was reading your stuff today, Camilla. I was like, maybe it's not about the political influence; it's actually about the money, right? They saw that they could show some. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't about the governments approaching them for power. It was about them trying to bring money in, throwing minor pieces of sort of suggestion.
We are overvaluating them, you are meaning. I mean, Probably they're more basic than.
What I mean is that potentially it wasn't governments being like, right, we need to infiltrate and lobby hard. Because I mean, you can just pay a major consultancy to lobby for you. There's loads of like really well-known consultancies that lobby on behalf of governments in Brussels.
Yeah.
So you could just throw your money there. So then it makes me think that actually perhaps the ecosystem of this corruption ring was potentially in and of itself to generate money for the people in it, not in any sense really for sort of political favor.
Just funny, I'm getting a message from a former diplomat who used to work in Brussels, and he's saying there's no way the European Parliament will get to initiate legal proposals, will get the power to initiate legal proposals after this. So, you know, it's interesting from an EU institutional perspective as well, how this has tarnished the reputation of the Parliament. I hope the person doesn't mind that I just read out their opinion, but
no, I think that would be a shared opinion as well, though.
But I think that's pretty broadly shared, and the fact that the Parliament it is the junior player, but it has been seen to be kind of grabbing a little bit more power for itself and certainly trying to assert itself more. Can it really do that now when it's kind of going through as we said, like these internal convulsions, trying to really clean up its act? It's going to take a long time to rebuild this trust, I think.
In itself as well.
Yeah, trust in itself, and you know, yeah. Here we go.
Guys, we've done an hour. That was amazingly interesting for me.
Thank you. For me too, really.
For everybody watching, I fully intend on doing more of these. I find this really interesting. These conversations are happening behind, and I think this story like needs as much air as possible to get it out. I'd love it if you guys join me again. I'm going to invite some of our other colleagues from some of the other.
Let us know when you are making it again. It would be interesting to follow you.
I will, and I'm going to invite everyone. I'm going to do such a. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and comment, and anyone that's watching afterwards, who's potentially watched until this point, you can comment, and because both of these guys are going to be linked in on the section, so they'll be able to answer, and you can at them and talk to them as well, because I think the conversation is useful and should be had. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
And Camilla, super interesting. And we're all looking out for your story tomorrow, Camilla. Have a great evening.
And sorry again for my English.
It's amazing English.
Next time I will speak in Mauritanian. I don't know. No.
Okay, then.
Have a wonderful evening. Take a steady.
Ciao. Good night. Good night.